We live in a world that demands action, achievement, and outward success, but there's an unspoken truth gnawing at the edges of our existence. Most of us are deeply disconnected from what truly matters to us. We wake up, go through our routines, and fulfill obligations, but somewhere in between, there's a growing emptiness, a sense that all these motions lack substance. Let me ask you, this is what you're doing right now a reflection of who you really are, or are you just trying to keep up with the expectations of others? Carl Jung believed the human psyche is divided into many layers, and at the very center lies the self, a unifying force that holds the blueprint of who we're meant to become. But most people spend their entire lives avoiding this deeper self because it requires something that is both terrifying and liberating: honesty. Not the kind of honesty we show others, but the kind we owe ourselves. To find your true life purpose, you don't start by asking what you want. That's too shallow. Instead, the real question is, who are you willing to be? Jung argued that the path to meaning isn't about chasing goals or ideals, it's about integrating the layers of our personality. This includes not just the parts of ourselves we like, but also the shadow, the parts we suppress, deny, or fear. Here's the truth: you can't find your purpose if you're at war with yourself. Purpose isn't something you discover, it's something you create. And that creation comes from wholeness. Think about the roles you play. You might be a parent, a student, a worker, or a friend, but beneath these identities, there's a deeper version of you that longs to be expressed, a version that doesn't care about societal approval, recognition, or rewards. The question is, are you willing to let that version speak? This isn't an abstract idea. It's something tangible, and you can feel it when you're aligned with it. It's that sense of flow when time disappears, that strange aliveness when you're doing something you love without overthinking it. But let's be clear, finding this alignment isn't a matter of luck or talent. It's a matter of courage.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Most people avoid this kind of work because it demands that we confront our contradictions. You might say you want freedom, but then you cling to security. You might dream of being creative, but you spend your days following routines that drain your energy. If we're honest, we're full of these inconsistencies, and they keep us stuck in cycles of dissatisfaction. Jung called this the tension of opposites, and he believed it's the key to transformation. Instead of trying to resolve these contradictions by choosing one side, we have to hold both in balance. What does this mean in practical terms? It means acknowledging that your desire for freedom and your fear of uncertainty are both valid. It means recognizing that your ambition and your longing for rest both have a place. Only when you stop fighting yourself can you begin to see the threads of your true purpose. Let me ask you something: when was the last time you felt deeply alive? Not entertained, not distracted, but alive in a way that made you forget everything else. For many people, it's been so long that they can't even answer this question. That's because we've been conditioned to ignore the signals of our own inner life. We're told to follow rules, meet deadlines, and fit into systems, but no one teaches us how to listen to ourselves. And yet, this is the starting point. Over the next 7 days, you're going to learn how to reconnect with this inner signal. But before we get into the steps, I need to make something clear: this isn't about finding some grand mission or becoming someone extraordinary. That's just another trap of the ego. Your purpose isn't out there waiting for you. It's already within you, buried under layers of fear, conditioning, and distraction. The work is to uncover it, piece by piece, by paying attention to the clues your psyche has been giving you all along. Start small. Pay attention to what draws your interest, not what you think should interest you. Notice the moments when you feel energized, not the moments when you're merely productive. These are signals from your deeper self, and they're easy to miss if you're too busy chasing external goals. But let's go deeper. Imagine for a moment that all the expectations in your life disappeared: your responsibilities, your obligations, your need to impress others. What would you do with your time? This isn't a hypothetical exercise, it's a revelation. The things that come to mind in those moments of imagined freedom are clues to what your soul is yearning for. Here's the challenge: most of us don't trust these yearnings. We dismiss them as impractical, childish, or foolish. Jung called this the voice of the collective unconscious, the inherited beliefs and norms that keep us from stepping into our individuality. But here's the thing: the more you ignore these inner callings, the more disconnected you become from your true self. And the more disconnected you are, the harder it is to live a life of meaning. So the question isn't just what do you want to do? It's what are you willing to risk, because finding your purpose isn't safe. It's not about staying comfortable or fitting in. It's about stepping into the unknown, making mistakes, and being vulnerable. It's about admitting that you don't have all the answers but being willing to follow the questions that matter most. Let me ask you something else. What are you afraid to lose? This is a question most people avoid because it forces us to confront the attachments that keep us stuck. Maybe it's the fear of losing approval, security, or identity. But here's the paradox: the things you're most afraid to lose are often the very things you need to let go of to find your purpose. Think about it. If you're clinging to a job you hate because it pays well, you're sacrificing your potential for the illusion of stability. If you're staying in relationships that drain you because you fear being alone, you're trading your freedom for a sense of belonging. These trade-offs might seem small in the moment, but over time they add up to a life that feels hollow. I'm not saying you should abandon your responsibilities or make reckless decisions, but I am saying you need to be honest about what you're holding on to and why. Because until you let go of what no longer serves you, you can't make space for what truly matters. This is the first step to finding your purpose: learning to listen to the signals of your inner life and having the courage to act on them, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about being willing to question the assumptions you've been living by and asking what's really true for you. Let me leave you with one final question for today. If you stripped away all the roles, expectations, and fears, what would be left? This isn't an easy question, but it's an essential one. Because in the end, your purpose isn't something you achieve, it's who you become. What if most of what you believe about yourself is a lie? Not a deliberate lie, but a story you've unconsciously accepted, a story crafted by your upbringing, culture, and experiences. This story defines what you think you're capable of, what you deserve, and what life should look like. But here's the problem: if the story isn't yours, then neither is the life you're living. And if the life you're living isn't yours, how can you ever hope to find purpose? Jung believed that the human psyche is shaped by both personal experiences and the collective unconscious, a reservoir of shared archetypes, myths, and patterns inherited from humanity's history. These archetypes influence how we see ourselves and the world. For example, the hero archetype tells us to seek glory, overcome obstacles, and achieve greatness. The caregiver archetype urges us to put others first and sacrifice for the greater good. These patterns are neither good nor bad, they're tools for understanding life. But when we cling to them too tightly, when we mistake them for our true identity, they become prisons. Let's be honest, most of us are trapped in these archetypal roles without even realizing it. Maybe you've been playing the hero, always striving to prove your worth through achievement, but deep down you feel exhausted and empty. Or perhaps you've been stuck in the caregiver role, constantly meeting everyone else's needs while neglecting your own. These roles can feel comfortable because they give us a sense of purpose, but it's a false purpose, a purpose that serves the role, not the self. So how do you break free? The first step is to recognize the difference between the roles you play and the essence of who you are. Ask yourself this: are you living a life that feels true, or are you living a life that feels expected? The difference is subtle but profound. A true life feels aligned with your inner values, even if it's messy or unconventional. An expected life, on the other hand, feels polished but hollow, like a script you're performing for an unseen audience. But recognizing the lie is only the beginning. The harder task is letting it go, and letting go, paradoxically, often feels like loss. This is where most people stop, because they equate purpose with gain, more success, more clarity, more certainty. But the truth is, finding your purpose requires subtraction. It's about shedding the layers of who you think you're supposed to be until what's left is raw, real, and undeniably you. Let me give you an example. Imagine you've been chasing a career that looks impressive on paper, but every day you feel drained and uninspired. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that things will get better, that you're lucky to have this opportunity. But deep down, you know the truth: this isn't your path. The question is, why are you staying? Is it the fear of starting over, the guilt of disappointing others, or the belief that you don't deserve to pursue something different? Here's the hard truth: no one else can answer these questions for you. And no one else can free you from the stories you've accepted. You have to do the work of dismantling them piece by piece, even if it feels like your world is falling apart. Because in a way it is. The old world, the world built on illusions, has to collapse before you can build something real. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of your conscious and unconscious selves into a unified whole. It's not about becoming someone new, it's about becoming who you've always been beneath the roles, masks, and conditioning. And this process is messy, uncomfortable, and often painful. But it's also the only way to find a purpose that's truly yours. Let me ask you something difficult: what are you pretending not to know? Maybe it's the fact that the life you're living isn't making you happy. Maybe it's the realization that you've been chasing someone else's dream. Or maybe it's the fear that if you stopped pretending, you wouldn't know who you are. These are the truths we bury because they threaten our sense of stability. But the longer we bury them, the more disconnected we become from ourselves. If you're serious about finding your purpose, you have to stop running from these truths. You have to face them, even if it means dismantling everything you thought you knew about yourself. This isn't easy, but it's necessary. Because purpose isn't found in the places where you're comfortable. It's found in the places where you're honest. Now, let's talk about fear. Fear is the greatest obstacle to purpose, not because it stops us, but because it deceives us. It tells us that staying in the known is safer than stepping into the unknown. It convinces us that our comfort zones are protecting us, when in reality they're suffocating us. Jung understood this well. He believed that fear often masks our deepest desires. The thing you're most afraid of is usually the thing you most need to face. For example, if you're afraid of failure, it's probably because success matters deeply to you. If you're afraid of rejection, it's because connection is something your soul craves. And if you're afraid of being alone, it's because you know the value of relationships. Fear isn't the enemy, it's a guide. But only if you're willing to face it instead of avoiding it. Let me ask you another question. What would you do if you weren't afraid? This isn't a rhetorical question. It's a mirror that reflects the gap between who you are and who you're capable of becoming. The answer might terrify you, and that's a good sign. It means you're getting closer to the truth. But here's the paradox: finding your purpose isn't about eliminating fear. It's about learning to move forward in spite of it. Fear will always be there, whispering its doubts and warnings. The question is, will you listen? Or will you choose to trust the quiet voice within you that knows what's right, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else? This brings us to one of the most important insights from Jungian philosophy: purpose isn't a destination. It's a process. It's not something you achieve once and for all, it's something you live out moment by moment. And this process requires two things: awareness and action. Awareness is the ability to see yourself clearly, to recognize your patterns, question your beliefs, and tune into your inner signals. Action is the willingness to take steps toward what feels true, even if it's uncertain or uncomfortable. Together, these two forces create a life that's aligned with your deeper self. But let's be clear, alignment doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you'll always know exactly what to do, or that you'll never make mistakes. In fact, mistakes are an essential part of the process. They teach you what works and what doesn't. They help you refine your path. And most importantly, they remind you that you're human, a messy, imperfect, wonderfully complex being who's trying to live a life that matters. So let me leave you with a challenge over the next few days. Start paying attention to the small moments when you feel alive. Not the big achievements or the dramatic breakthroughs, but the quiet, ordinary moments when something inside you lights up. These moments are clues to your purpose. They're the threads of meaning that, when woven together, create a life that feels true. But remember, purpose isn't something you find, it's something you live. And the only way to live it is to stop waiting for answers and start asking better questions.